Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. We are enthusiastically opening up the medical case files of 4 absolute American giants. We're talking about presidents who literally shaped the nation, the guys who looked down on us from Mount Rushmore and the history books. But, as we'll discover through the historical accounts today, behind all those monumental legacies, they were really just mortal men with very human vulnerabilities. We're going to investigate the fascinating medical realities, the conditions, and the honestly quite primitive treatments of their final days.
Okay, let's dive into this. Chronologically, we'll be looking at Washington's fatal throat infection, Lincoln's lethal head trauma, Teddy Roosevelt's chronic jungle ailments, FDR's hidden heart disease, and finally, the overall vulnerability of great leaders.
All right, starting us off with Section 1, Washington's fatal throat infection.
So, picture this. It's December 1799. The 67-year-old George Washington just wanted to enjoy his retirement at Mount Vernon. I mean, the guy had already led a revolution and served as the first president. But a seemingly harmless, everyday sequence of events triggered a massive crisis. After spending hours out on horseback in freezing rain and snow, he came inside and sat down for dinner in damp clothes. Just the very next day, the symptoms hit him. Severe hoarseness, chills, and a painfully sore throat.
His condition rapidly spiraled into what modern doctors would diagnose as acute epiglottitis. Basically, this is a severe swelling in the throat that literally acts like a plug, totally obstructing your breathing. What started as just a simple cold morphed into this terrifying physical crisis, leaving the former general desperately gasping for every single breath.
And here is where it gets incredibly tragic. The brutal reality of primitive medical treatments in 1799 arguably sealed his fate. His doctors utilized multiple rounds of bloodletting. They drained an estimated 40% of his total blood volume in just 12 hours. They also applied these really painful, blistering agents directly to his throat. Intended to cure him, these aggressive, misguided treatments practically drained whatever strength he had left and undeniably hastened his end.
But even as his body failed, and those treatments failed him, Washington faced his end with the exact same stoic, battlefield courage that defined his entire life. Fully aware his time was short, he gave his final instructions, and get this, he astonishingly checked his own pulse. He calmly uttered these final words, "It is well," before passing away on December 14th, 1799.
Moving right along to Section 2, Lincoln's lethal head trauma. Just 5 days, literally 5 days after Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered, which effectively ended the brutal Civil War, the president understandably sought a moment of relaxation. He attended the play Our American Cousin at Ford's Theater on April 14, 1865. During the third act, assassin John Wilkes Booth timed his move, firing a single pistol shot right into the lower back of Lincoln's head. The president instantly went completely limp and comatose, and his breathing became heavily labored. After an agonizing overnight vigil, he was pronounced dead the next morning at 7:22 a.m.
In the absolute chaos following the head trauma, Lincoln was carried across the street to a boarding house called the Peterson House. Because of his famous towering height, he actually had to be laid diagonally on a bed that was just simply too small for his frame. Throughout the night, doctors repeatedly probed the wound with their fingers to try and remove blood clots and relieve the immense intracranial pressure. But sadly, the brain damage was just too severe. He never regained consciousness.
When he finally passed, his Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton, fittingly remarked, "Now he belongs to the ages." This sudden, deeply traumatic medical event plunged a nation that was only just beginning to heal from a massive war right back into a state of profound, unfathomable grief. He died a martyr for the very union he fought so incredibly hard to preserve.
Let's move to Section 3 and see how this theme builds. Teddy's chronic jungle ailments.
Theodore Roosevelt's famous strenuous life took a seriously brutal toll on his body over the years. In 1913, during his highly perilous expedition to map the Amazon's River of Doubt, he contracted severe malaria, suffering from intense fevers and delirium. He also sustained a really bad leg injury that, without modern antibiotics, became heavily infected. He survived it, but those jungle illnesses permanently weakened him. By the night of January 5, 1919, at age 60, he was suffering terribly from inflammatory rheumatism.
But what finally stopped the unstoppable president wasn't an assassin, and it wasn't a jungle expedition. It was a silent internal killer. Sometime in the early morning hours of January 6th, He died peacefully in his sleep from a coronary embolism. That's a blood clot that breaks loose and travels directly to the heart, blocking the blood flow completely. His servant found him looking as though he were merely sleeping.
Upon hearing the news, his son Archie sent out this powerful, incredibly brief telegraph to his brothers. The old lion is dead. It's just such a stark contrast to contemplate, right? A larger-than-life man who had survived assassins' bullets and the absolute deadliest Amazonian environments, ultimately dying quietly in his own bed at Sagamore Hill.
All right, opening the file on Section 4, FDR's hidden heart disease.
Entering 1945, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was carrying the absolute crushing weight of guiding the country through both the Great Depression and World War II. And there was this intense, dramatic contrast between public perception and his private medical reality. The public saw a resilient, vibrant leader on the cusp of victory. But privately, FDR was gaunt, exhausted, and secretly suffering from astronomical blood pressure, often over 200 systolic. And remember, this was at a time when effective blood pressure medications simply didn't exist yet. That hidden, untreated illness culminated on the afternoon of April 12, 1945. FDR had traveled to his retreat, the Little White House down in Warm Springs, Georgia, to get some much-needed rest. The sequence of events that day was terrifyingly ordinary. He was simply sitting for a portrait, surrounded by friends and family, just signing some documents. Then, out of absolutely nowhere, he suddenly raised his hand to his head. He immediately slumped over, totally unconscious. His unchecked blood pressure crisis had finally caused a massive cerebral hemorrhage. That's a severe stroke where a blood vessel actually bursts inside the brain, causing sudden unconsciousness and, as in FDR's tragic case, rapid death just a couple of hours later. This sudden medical event completely stunned the world and forced Vice President Harry Truman, who was actually largely unaware of crucial wartime secrets at the time, suddenly into immense power. Before he lost consciousness, the very last words he spoke when he raised his hand to his head were, "I have a terrific headache." It is such a deeply human, ordinary complaint. I mean, it's a symptom so many of us have felt. And it stands in this chilling contrast to the world-altering historical impact of his sudden absence, right on the dawn of global peace.
So the crucial point we're taking away here is in Section 5, the vulnerability of great leaders. Look, behind the giant monuments, the towering myths, and the historic achievements, these were just mortal men facing the exact same human experience of physical vulnerability that we all do. By taking a close look at their specific illnesses, Washington's throat infection made worse by primitive bloodletting, Lincoln's tragic head trauma, Teddy's lingering malaria, or FDR's untreated heart disease, it really demystifies these icons for us. It reminds us that they face their ends with the same complex mix of strength and vulnerability that defines every single one of us.
And that brings us to the end of today's investigation. But I want to leave you with a thought to ponder. Which historical giants' final days in medical mysteries should we open the case file on next? There is just so much more history out there, waiting to be understood through the lens of human health and medicine. Thank you so much for joining me on this historical explainer today. Stay curious and keep exploring the realities behind the legends.